Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new Celtics Beat. Again, we said it in the intro, 597. My God, Evan Valenti. Wow. What do we do when we get to 600? Should there be a special occasion of some sort? Do we throw a party? Do we do a live broadcast at the Garden? I don't know. We didn't do anything special for 500. Why would we?
No, what? That's not without trying, though. We did try.
We did try for 500. Yeah, 500. We tried it. Yeah, we had some grand plans. We wanted to get Grandy and Gorman and the two of us all in one room to do it, and it just unfortunately the schedules didn't align, and it was what it was. But 600 is, there's nothing special about 600 other than I guess just the longevity of the flagship Celtics podcast. I have to say it that way because there are about 14-ish Celtics podcasts on the CLNS Media Network. This is the number one, at least the original. I don't know if it's the number one most listened to. We hope it is. Garden Report's kind of a big deal. So shout out to Garden Report and everybody else out there. Shout out to everyone in the Celtics podcasting space. A guy who's got one, but he used to have two. He's watered it down. Chris Forsberg is here with us from NBC Sports Boston. Forsberg, how are you?
Thanks for saving me for episode 597, guys. Really big number.
We're ramping up to 600, so we got to start with like our big time guests, so we keep getting bigger. After Forsberg, I'm not sure where we're gonna go.
You know what we should do? We should reach out to Perk and see if he wants to come on and
that'll go well. I'm just gonna yell at Perk for an hour.
No, I want him to just yell at Celtics fans for an hour. I did appreciate his commentary about, basically who made Scal like the guard of the Celtics, or, however exactly he put it. But it was like, who gave you the right to determine whether or not I have been banished by the C's organization and I am allowed back and all that stuff. We don't need to talk about it. I just found it to be funny when he was on the on the Up in Smoke podcast or one of those. I don't know. But Celtics are coming off a loss to the Warriors. It was only their second loss of the year. One unbeaten remains in the Eastern Conference, the vaunted Cleveland Cavaliers. The Thunder took a loss last night as well in Denver. So it is just Cleveland as far as the undefeateds, sitting at 9-0. But the C's, it was the marquee game of the night on paper, and I think in many ways lived up to the hype. Not necessarily all the ways that people expected. Like, I think a lot of people going in thought, we're going to get 45 out of Tatum. We're going to get 30 plus out of Curry. This is going to be the FU Steve Kerr game in Boston and all that stuff. Forsberg tweeted out the Kerr introduction with Eddie Palladino, which, all the booze, obviously, that was a nice move on your part. I think people enjoyed that who were not in the building. But tell you what, I think that it's possible that the loss last night and Tatum having a good game, but not going off, not going nuclear, that wasn't actually the number one takeaway. In fact, I think it was the number 3 takeaway.
Oh,
I know. Here's number one that I realized as we were sort of, rapping a little bit pre-show and you guys were talking golf and I was focusing on something else entirely. If our last show, today's a Thursday, obviously. Our last show was also on a Thursday, correct? It was Thursday last week because we, wedge it in between the Wednesday, Friday when the C's have that set up in their schedule. We don't want to do a show on Friday and then they have a game that night. Give you a little bit of a runway if you're out there listening. Well, the Celtics lost last Wednesday at Indiana, and they lost last night at home to the Warriors. The only 2 losses. So we might have to be done recording on Wednesdays or Thursdays after Wednesday games. I think this is our fault. We need to be held accountable.
So we're the bad luck guys is what you're telling me.
Yeah. So like the Celtics next week have a Wednesday, Saturday situation. So I think we need to record on Friday. We need to get off a Thursday. And because of this.
You know what, Kaufman, I respect this. We have to do our part. Everybody's got to do their part. This is directly out of Celtic pride.
Yeah, everyone needs to be aware.
Are you Dan Aykroyd in this situation, or are you Marv in this situation?
I'm taller, so I guess that would make me.
Yeah, you could. Daniel Stern. Yeah, okay.
Daniel Stern
at Brooklyn. Yeah, well, we know who's tied up. With a muzzle on his face. It's the guy who's got himself looking like it on a beer can. It's Forsberg, so it's perfect. The three of us. Yeah, he's getting up together.
There it is.
Here's your reward.
It's just so good.
If you're listening, forget it.
So good.
Check out the video on the CLNS YouTube page. The other takeaway, that was number one. The other takeaway, and that one was kind of a joke. I'm being slightly more serious about this one. The quote from Tatum last night, guys.
This is disrespectful to Neemias Queta. But you didn't even put him in your top two.
Not in top three.
Top three.
Top three.
The loss in Tatum not going crazy is number 4. Queta being good at basketball is number 3. Here's number 2. Tatum had a quote last night when asked about basically, well, why isn't he more, fiery, angry on about the 797,000th time that Tatum has been asked about his personality and why he's not a more fiery individual and all that. Tatum said, and this is part of the quote, I wish we could just play it for you. He said, that's what I've been dealing with my entire career. People want me to be louder. People want me to be meaner. One thing about Jason is I'm always going to do what the F I want to do. Is that the first time that Tatum went Ricky Henderson and third person?
100%.
I don't remember another time that's happened. I think that's a very big deal, Forsberg.
Chris doesn't remember another time that Jason has gone third person. So, I actually, when someone sent me the quote, because I wasn't in the interview room, and I said, did someone else say this? I couldn't figure out that it was Jason talking in the third person. Look, do you think he would have been a little bit more fiery if they had won? Do we think the tenor of the, the little questioning and everything would have been a little bit different if they won? So I get it. He's always going to be asked these questions about, his sort of cool as ice demeanor. And there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone's a little bit different in how they approach it. And sometimes a cooler head is a good thing. And I thought he did play pretty in check, right? Maybe one or two he forced early as they were sending the doubles at him. And you could tell he just wanted to kind of get a groove going. But I thought he made the right play and guys weren't knocking down shots early. And so you could live with that. But yeah, I'll even admit, third quarter, I looked up and I was like, whoa, he's at 30? It happened so quietly as he kind of got going with some bench units. But to me, the big storyline was it was going to be Kerr and Tatum at the onset, and then it was going to be sort of the old guard who sort of laid out this foundation of here's how you win with a 3-point shot versus this new spunky champion who wants to get to that level and be a dynasty. And it was interesting to me to see that the Warriors can still tap into it a little bit, that Steph is still, my God, no one should ever want to see him across the court in a playoff series. And, look, that's what old teams do. They just kind of hang around and give themselves a chance. And I was a little surprised that the Celtics weren't a little bit more crisp down the stretch where they've been so good through this championship run.
Well, that was the thing. If they, fall behind and have to mount this comeback, and they do, Mazzulla leads them on a great turnaround. Some of those shots, Tatum in particular in the third quarter, as Forsberg said, start to fall. He had 17, 20 points, whatever it was, in the third quarter after a slow, 4 points in the opening quarter, 8 in the opening half. It was not the Tatum game people were expecting. In fact, I saw people after White had a dozen points in the first 2-3 minutes. People are tweeting it what did Steve Kerr do to Derek? My God. But yeah, Tatum finally got going. The thing was, once you got to around the 7-minute mark of that fourth quarter, it was just all Warriors from there, which it's true. Over the last couple of years under Joe Mazzulla, very uncharacteristic. And you can say part of that was the Celts weren't at full strength, down 2 starters. They've been down 2 for a couple of games, been down 1 for the entire season in no Porzingis and obviously no Jaylen Brown, but that would be excuse making. The Celtics were ahead. They were well positioned to win and just kind of fell apart down the stretch there. And it is, I don't think there's any huge takeaway from last night's game to where you panic. You say, the Warriors are coming for you. The Celtics aren't who we thought they were. Nothing like that. It was a game. And, the next game tomorrow will be the next game. And that's it, because we're still in freaking November. But it was a little disappointing, sort of the way it unraveled there at the end, knowing that, again, just some of the narratives behind it, because I am a big narrative streak guy, that was a very winnable game and one that Tatum, I did expect to kind of, once he got hot in the third, I expected Tatum to emphatically finish it, and it didn't happen.
The thing that annoyed me was at the end of the game, what gave the Celtics their lead in the third quarter and really gave them a chance to win this game is what cost them in the fourth quarter, and I mean offensive rebounding. If you go back, $1:51 to go, Celtics start playing really good defense. It's 104-102 Golden State. The Celtics make Draymond Green take a 3-point shot, which is always what you want to do with Draymond. If he makes it, you just tip your cap and you walk down the other way. Draymond misses it, but Kevon Looney gets the offensive rebound, put back 106-102. Queta comes down the other end, a nice alley-oop from Drew Holiday. And then coming back down, 106-104, $1:22 left. Curry misses a three. Hield gets the offensive rebound. Tatum blocks Curry's shot. And then Kevon Looney gets the offensive rebound and gets another 2-point shot, 108-104 with 1:13 left. Can't let that happen. Boston got back in this game by crashing the offensive glass from the corner spots, from the top of the key, from everywhere. And it was collective effort. It wasn't just one or two guys doing it. You had Jordan Walsh's, Queta's, Sam Hauser's, everybody trying to contribute on the offensive glass, got him back in the game. But it wasn't so much execution. It was more of finishing the play. And Boston didn't finish those two ginormous possessions, and it cost them. And people want to say, oh, Tatum missed Buddy Hield at the end of the game. Sure, that's a brain fart. Shouldn't happen. But they were already down a little bit, and in my opinion, a little too far away. The distance was too much by the time that shot happened, even later in the quarter. What happened, those two offensive rebounds for Golden State gave them life, and they took it and they ran with it. And for me, again, last night, I thought it was an awesome basketball game. I thought it was an excellent game for the Celtics in terms of, okay, here's a great defensive team, took away a bunch of things that you wanted to do, and they had to revamp their entire offensive game plan at halftime, and they did, and it worked. But just not finishing it out. And that's a little annoying. But one of the things that I'm thankful for Forsberg, and I'm sure you're thankful for this too, guess what's not happening today? Sky's not falling. Every loss last year, if you did a post-game podcast, if you did your post-game show on NBC Sports Boston, and you look at what people are saying, the entire world was melting down after every single Celtics loss last year. This year, it's like, hey, you've got to execute better on the stretch. Would have loved to have Jaylen Brown and or Kristaps Porzingis in this game, but you hung with a really tough team that's having a great season. I mean, Golden State defensively last night was super impressive. Can't deny that. Could have won that one, but tough one. Wasn't like they got blown out. Just make some corrections and head on to the next one. But Forsberg, those late game offensive rebounds, they killed me. I don't know about you, but when in the moment, I was like, that's really front. You can't do that against this team because they're going to kill you with Buddy Hield and with Steph Curry.
So I think the thing for me was that they've just been so good in those moments, especially through that playoff run. All those plays they made against the Pacers, you never felt like they were going to lose a game when it was close, or maybe you did, but then they found a way. And the other thing I kept thinking was, well, what was the last time we had one of those sort of despondent losses? You have to go back to like May 9th, I think it was. They lost a home game against Cleveland in round 2 to when that series was 1-1, and that's close as it got in any playoffs pretty much. And, you could be like, they're still struggling at home. What's going on? And they dropped one in the first round of Miami, or, it just, but you never got to the point where it felt like I remember going to the ballot posters. I kept saying, like, can they execute when it matters most? And boy, did they, like, throughout that playoff run. So I think it's just annoying to see them kind of on a big stage, sort of the first big stage of the season. Like, yeah, there was the Knicks game, but that was opening night, the rings, the emotion, all that. This was like just the first sort of measuring stick game against a really good team, and a team that I really thought, despite the 50-point game last year, still had a little bit of real estate. They beat you in 22. They kind of get you every now and then in overtime a couple times. So I was eager to see if the Celtics could really just say, they've shifted to a new gear, and that team is the old dynasty, that here comes the new one. So I get what everyone says when they're like, we're not melting down, no one's losing their mind over the loss. It was still kind of annoying because it was like so much of it was preventable. And some of it was like, Queta had a great game, but he was so often put in tough spots of defending Curry and stuff like that they were out of position to get the rebound. And that you can say that Tatum Hield sequence wasn't a big deal, but like Tatum misses the turnaround and then he's like sulking a little bit and he's like looking at the official and he's frustrated. It's still 4-point game at that point. You got to get back. And then he gets back and then he just totally falls asleep. So I don't know. I expect more from this team, and I suspect that Joe Mazzulla will have some fun with that film. So yeah, like I agree on the notion. Nothing to lose your mind about, but everyone's giving me crap last night because I was a little salty about it. And I'm like, it's okay to hold this team to a high standard. I don't think they're gonna go 82-0, clearly. But I thought this was a game they should have won. And they couldn't get out of their own way at various points.
We're going to take one quick break. Tell you today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, Ev.
Yeah, Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an insurance policy so that if your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured, and if your player leaves the game the first half, doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. And Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Kaufman, nobody, and I mean nobody in the industry is coming close to the kinds of perks that Prize Picks offers on a daily basis.
It's not hyperbole. That is fact. So if you think Steph Curry's going to get more than, say, 4 3-pointers next week, or Anthony Edwards more than 27 points, cook up your hot takes with your friends and then go out win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code. It is CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is CLNS code. What's that, Ev? What's that code? CLNS?
Yeah, it's our initials, CLNS. Easy.
Nice and easy. $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's get back to the show.
I do, I hadn't really thought about it, but what Ev said and what you acknowledged as well, Chris, the sort of talk radio or talk TV, sports talking head acknowledgement of, if this were last year at this time, like you would be here, I could hear it in my head. You'd be hearing like, championship teams, have it in their DNA to win this game, that you don't lose a game like that. And I like that, as Ev noted, like nobody can say that right now because this is a championship team. Quite clearly, just won and is favorite to win this one. And despite what Cleveland's doing, you put them in a playoff series, I'd be willing to bet, other than maybe the ESPN folks trying to generate something, I think most people would take Boston. And so, there is no panic to come out of this, obviously. But yeah, I'm with you. It was disappointing. It was a little, I wouldn't even go so far as to say discouraging. I'll put a line between disappointing and discouraging, and I will lean on the former and just say, yeah, whatever. Like it wasn't what you want it to be. But again, that was for me, and this goes back to, I guess, the Tatum explanation post game and criticism of him. And I'm not sitting here criticizing Tatum, because again, he had a fine game. He just, he had like a regular Jason Tatum game when people thought he was going to have an explosive Jason Tatum game. Like everybody was, I'll tell you this from a betting standpoint, everybody was taking the 30, 32 plus points out of Tatum last night. Nobody was thinking like it. You would have thought his player prop was at 40 plus with what the expectations were going into that game. And so when it comes to takeaways, not that we don't already know that he is fully capable of taking over games, but seeing that, he was a little mild-mannered and, like you said, forcing the occasional shot in the opening half and at points definitely deferring to White because he had the hot hand. As that game sort of got into the fourth quarter and things started to slow down for Boston, do you look at him any differently in not questioning who he is or his makeup or what he can do or anything like that, but just saying, man, like, this was really, like, I hope you went home and laid in bed last night and just said, I could have done more. I could have done something different. Like, I know you've got that dog in you. I've seen it 1,000 times. Where was it last night?
Get him, Ev.
Dude, I can't let this slide, man, because if you look this morning, Tatum had 14 potential assists last night, ended up with only 2. So, like, it wasn't Tatum's fault. Again, the lapse in judgment at the end of the game, notwithstanding, it's not on Jason Tatum, brother. Like, no way. Absolutely not.
I'd be willing to bet without looking it up. Most of those potential assists came in the first quarter, though.
Yeah, but because he was taking what the game needs. Like,
sure, but I'm talking about the fourth quarter and the lack of really taking it over.
But you can't. No, I'm not doing this, because if as a disciple of Joe Mazzulla, you got to understand, it's not just about one thing. The game ebbs and flows. It goes back and forth. It's not just about one singular thing. It's about the thing that led to the thing that led to the thing that led to that thing. So I'm not going to let you sit here and be like, oh, Jason Tatum didn't show up. No, you know what, he did show up, though, in the third quarter after having a subpar first half where he was a little frustrated, turned the ball over a bunch. Guys weren't hitting shots, and he was not hitting shots himself. The third quarter, he righted the ship a little bit. What do you have, 17 in the third quarter, 19 in the third quarter, something like that, to get himself back on track, get the Celtics back into the game.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying Tatum was bad last night. I think I was
headline. Celtics beat. Tatum had a bad game.
Tatum sucked against the Warriors. There's your title. You don't think? But if I said to you, Ev, because we didn't have this conversation, if I said to you, we're sitting there on our text thread going into the game, what do you expect from Tatum tonight? You wouldn't have given me like, well, he's going to flirt with a triple-double. He's going to have, between 35 and 40. I bet he has at least 6 assists. He's definitely going to have 10 rebounds. I think if I gave you the stat line that he finished with, you would have been a little underwhelmed.
Not really.
He probably should have had the triple-double.
Not really. The only thing that made me not angry, but if you look at the box score, like the lack of rebounds, but rebounds a team stat. Everybody else is picking him up. It's not like Tatum was, he's not a guy that doesn't rebound. They had 47 rebounds as a team. Like, they didn't rebound the ball well. It just sucks that Golden State had 53, but it's not like they didn't rebound the basketball well. And again, part of the assist is to have the other guy, hit the shot. Mm-hmm. The only thing that was disappointing, but again, it was more of a hats off to Golden State for defending him this way. They really made it hard. I mean, they're doubling Tatum, 30 feet away from the basket. And normally, and Drew has done this, and Drew and Scout both have done a good job of this, of like pointing out when you double Tatum, like, you're probably toast. Okay. Mm-hmm. And like, I've heard Drew multiple times, I think on broadcast this season, be like, oh, you just can't do that. You can't double team Tatum and leave, Jaylen Brown or Derek White wide open. They had that nice play that they figured out of, they would set up in the second half. It was more Tatum being the screener, which helped him get free and get going in the third quarter. And then in the other way, and Kaufman, you brought this up earlier, and this is, again, trusting your teammates. This is something that you want Jason Tatum to do, bring all the attention to himself. And all of a sudden, there's Derek White leaking out to the right or leaking out to the left, and in Derek White wide open, as you saw, is a bad, just bad defense. You don't want to do that. You don't want to leave Derek White open ever. So it's, for me, like, I think you're being a little too harsh, just because of the quote after the game. I have no problem with Jason Tatum not being a super fiery guy. Totally fine with me. I think by now, as an NBA champion, 3-time first team All NBA player, I think we can calm down on that. I think it was just
probably trade him.
Yeah, sure. It was just more frustrating in the first half that that Golden State took them out of their offense so easily. But again, you have to also credit the coaching staff of the Warriors and the players themselves for executing that and making it hard for the Celtics. Celtics showed us some fight, bringing it back, taking the lead. But I'm not giving Jason Tatum any flack for not going super nuclear. I thought he played a pretty, outside of the first half, I thought he was pretty good. And even though he wasn't scoring the basketball, Chris, am I taking crazy pills here? I just thought everything you said was slanderous.
If you told me he got to 32 points, I would have probably been surprised, because I would have thought it was an under night, because I just thought they would send the double and he would be forced to give the ball up, and the Celtics would beat them that way. And I think like they missed an opportunity early to sort of build a lead. Like, obviously they had a pretty sizable advantage off the Derek White makes, and then they still were missing shots when Tatum was setting them up, and I felt like it could have been bigger. And then just a lot of uncharacteristic stuff. Celtics usually dominate the final couple minutes of a quarter. The end of the first half was a hot mess. Like, they could not get out of their own way. They messed up 2-for-1s, and all of a sudden, forget who hit the buzzer beater going into the half, but like all of a sudden you're down 11 and you're like, what happened? And that Celtics never put themselves in that spot. And so they caught themselves in the third, but then lost it in the fourth. And so it's just very uncharacteristic, and no excuses, like we the nights they roll without stars, we don't point it out, and point to the depth and how good they've been. Warriors bench kicked their butt. This was a night where Warriors depth and Steve Kerr pretty much trolling us by playing 11 guys and being very good with those 11 guys. So I thought Kerr had a hell of a night, hell of a game plan. He can downplay like the whole notion of why people were mad about Tatum, but he coached his butt off, put his team in position to win. Thought he was just as much of a factor as anybody in that game with the way he schemed. And so Celtics just got to be better in those instances. And like if it becomes a pattern, I'll be worried about it. But yeah, it's like, it's pretty easy to just say, very good, proud team on the other side. And they were ready for this matchup, and they probably wanted it for their coach. And you could tell in the way they were hounding Tatum early. You just got to be a little bit better. And there's like 1,000 little things that I could nitpick down the stretch from pretty much every guy. Like, I mean, Derek White very rarely makes a bad play. That foul on Curry, you can make a case it wasn't a foul. Still, you can't put yourself in that position, right? Like,
I'd like to make the case that it wasn't foul, please.
Yeah, I mean, Kevon Looney probably should have been
ridiculous.
Whistled. And I don't know how with the new rule you go to the tape and you don't see that. But I also get like referees are very rarely going to overturn their own call, and the foul calls are just they get, if like you graze a guy, it's going to stand. So they rolled the dice on that instance. I'm glad it didn't come down to another like challengeable play that could have swung things. But yeah, everyone just needs to be a little bit better, and as long as they're better in May and June, no harm, no foul.
So while celebrating depth, and again, this opportunity, no Jaylen Brown, obviously no Porzingis, but that just goes without saying for a couple of months at least. This is, it's always the opportunity for the Celtics, other players, role players to kind of show out. And I don't want to limit Derek White in that way, because I do think he's more than depth. He's more than a role player. He's an important piece of this team that we don't spend nearly enough time on this show talking about. Obviously, he got off to an incredible start. He finished with a solid game, 26 points, 7 of 16 from 3. My God, like just and not even the, oh my God, he hit 7. It's more the volume of the 16. I'm still not even mentally quite used to Derek White hoisting 16 3-pointers in a game, but hell, when they're falling, I mean, by all means, do it. We could talk about Derek, but where I was going with the depth thing is I want to talk about Pritchard a little bit here, because, again, solid, reliable off the bench, 32 minutes, 16 points, 5 of 13, 3 of 11 from 3, few rebounds, few assists. Are we at a point, maybe we're beyond the point, and I just haven't been thinking enough about it, where it's not just Jaylen Brown's out thing, the shots need to come from somewhere. This has been going on all year long, where we should just expect that Peyton Pritchard has grown into a guy and has the importance within this offense, and certainly the trust from Mazzulla and his teammates, to where he is going to, at minimum, take 10 shots in a game. Like, and we should generally, and I know there are a couple of times it hasn't happened, but we should generally expect 10, 12 plus points out of Peyton Pritchard. He is just that guy, that sixth man for them right now that is going to give you that kind of production. I mean, every game with the exception of 2, he has taken at least 10 shots. He is averaging on the year 11 or 12. He is averaging 16 points per game, because he has gone over 20 a couple of times. And again, the 3-pointer is obviously falling with great regularity, 40%, 41% even. Pritchard continues to impress me, is really where I'm going with this. Not just in terms of what he's capable of, but what they want him to do and trust him to do. And it doesn't take a back seat with Jaylen Brown. Again, it happens when Brown's available too. I don't know if it starts to take a back seat a little bit when Porzingis comes back, but we're several weeks away from that, Chris.
You continue to bury Neemias Queta in this podcast, but I will play along.
We'll get there.
And note that, so one of the reasons I thought, everyone kept asking me this summer, like, how do they replace the Porzingis minutes? Do they need another big? Is Luke Cornett and Neemias Queta enough to get by? And I would say you can't look at it as sort of one for one, but Pritchard's just going to play more. They're going to figure it out. They're going to go small. There's going to be like opportunities. And I guess they really haven't even gone small. Like, I mean, they played double big half, like most of the night last night. But you just know Pritchard has won the trust of Joe and is going to get every opportunity to thrive. And so it was not a surprise to me that he's in the 6-man conversation now. I thought with robust playing time, he would be able to put an imprint on. I think him and Sam were the 2 net rating leaders in the NBA last season. Good things happen when they're out there. They pair well with anybody, whether it's like bench heavy groups or running with Tatum and spacing the floor and giving him room to operate. So it checks all the boxes. And I keep telling people from like when the Warriors people were asking about him, and I said, this was any other team in the league, he'd be a starter, but you got Drew Holiday and Derek White in front of you. So it's just not there. And it might never be there for poor Pritchard, but there's going to be a role and there's going to find minutes. And even when Porzingis comes back, as they try to, go through the doldrums and limit minutes overall, I suspect we'll still get a heavy dose of Peyton Pritchard along the way. And he'll continue to be in that conversation just based on the output.
Kaufman, what's crazy to me is he's finishing games. Like he's not only playing a lot, he's playing in the fourth quarter a lot and finishing games. There are a couple recently. I think either 1 or 2 in Charlotte he finished out. He's getting a lot of opportunity to not only play big minutes, but play the most important parts of the game and run the show in those.
Although, what's interesting with that is he's also finishing blowouts, which is not typically what happens when, I don't want to say a player of his caliber, a player in the role that he's in isn't usually out there on the floor in blowouts, but he is.
Well, he had a point guard at some point, and
he's a hybrid, is what I'm saying.
With JD, you get them both in the floor at the same time. We'll see how it goes. But you and I were very pro Pritchard since the Abu Dhabi games, and we came on here after the first one. We were like, Pritchard's going to have a hell of a season. Everybody, just look out.
He's ready to go. The off season. This wasn't even just an Abu Dhabi takeaway.
Well, we cemented it with that, but he's been spectacular. I think he, at least going into last night, I think was the favorite to win Sixth Man of the Year. If he's not the favorite at this moment, he's in the contention for it. So just testament to the guy working his ass off and Joe having faith in him to execute down the stretch when it matters and execute when they don't have guys on the floor that are, he often plays with, Tatum just because they like to sit the 2 guards at the same time, Derek and Drew. Did that a lot against the Warriors, where Tatum be on the floor, no Brown, obviously. So when Tatum's not on the floor, you got to have both White and Holiday out there. So when they're not on the floor, it's more of Sam Hauser and Pritchard, and then fill in the other spots. Now, one of the things that we have to talk about, Kaufman, is Queta, because we've talked about depth, and I have one other guy I'd like to talk about in a second. But what Queta did against the Warriors on Wednesday night was spectacular. I did not think he was capable of a performance like this, defensively mostly. From an offensive standpoint, what you're going to get. He's a lob threat for sure, an offensive rebound and guy that can put it back in if the tip's right, or he had one of those late in the game last night where it came off, popped up in the air, and he was right there with a loud, thunderous dunk. To set the Garden into a frenzy. But one of the things that really impressed me last night was his defense. And as we know, I think whether it was Brad, whether it was Ime, whether it's Joe, a way for you to get on the floor is to defend your position. And not only did Queta defend his position last night, he was indispensable defensively last night because Cornette couldn't hang on the perimeter with the guards that Golden State was throwing out there. And Queta, to his credit, was staying in front of guys on the perimeter. And, look, staying with Curry is a whole different animal. But when you're Neemias Queta and you're staying in front of Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield and, name any other guard they have, and holding up and not, falling for the shot fakes, staying level, staying grounded, and using your frame instead of jumping to alter shots, that was big for me. Because they really need a guy like that. Like I don't know if I trust Tillman completely to do stuff like that. It's been a little up and down this year. I don't trust Luke to do that. I hate putting Horford in those situations because of the age. We saw Kristaps Porzingis last year in that game against Atlanta where DeJounte Murray went after him routinely in pick and roll. To hold up like that was really impressive. And the offensive stuff is a different story for me. He's got to be a little quicker as when he's the guy, catching the pass off the pick and trying to make a decision when he's going to get hounded. He's got to be quicker with, getting it out to whatever shooter's going to be open in the corner. Got to be quicker with that. That's going to come with time. But the defensive stuff, man, I was blown away. Forsberg, I know you've been interested to talk about this the entire podcast. How impressive to you was Queta last night? Because it was revolutionary to me.
Yeah, he was awesome, and I've been like tentative about him because I do think, just as you said, there's some offensive limitations. Obviously, can't stretch the floor. I think Luke is great at making quick decisions. You put him in that short roll, and he sees a shooter, he's going to spray it. And Queta doesn't quite have that, but Queta is different, right? He's like more of a baseline guy, and he's going to finish dunks. To the point where I was actually getting concerned. I'm like, they got to stop throwing him lobs because he can't have any legs left by the end of that game. And yet, then he threw down like two more and blocked a Steph shot. So credit to Queta for giving him what you got. I was interested. Like, it's tough because centers, the data is a little bit skewed usually. It's usually really good or really bad. And so like last night, I'll put it this way. The Warriors were credited with 18 shots against Queta. Evan, how many do you think they made?
7.
11.
Yeah.
So and that again, sometimes you're the last line of defense. Someone blows past a guard, they lay up over you. You get credited with not doing it. So it's like it's fluky in a little ways. But I think he was 1 of 4 defending threes. And Steph obviously hit one. I think he stepped back on him, and that happens. It's Steph. I think the thing that bothered me was that they put Neemi in those spots repeatedly, and it left them vulnerable to the offensive rebound. So I don't put that on Queta. I put that on like, why were there switches happening that either, Queta was late getting back to box somebody out, or somebody else didn't box out, and it led to some chaos. But in general, I think if you would ask me what I thought we were going to get from Queta to this point of the season, and it's just so far ahead, even with knowing that Porzingis was going to be out, I would not have thought he would have had this much opportunity. I certainly wouldn't have thought he'd have multiple starts. And it's really encouraging to see like he's kind of on a pathway to being impactful. And they've got him on non-guaranteed money after the season. So like you start looking deeper down the road when you need cheaper contracts to keep some of this core together, regardless of how it looks overall. They're in a really good spot. And I think if you're a Sacramento fan, like, one, you're just thrilled that your team's relevant. But two, you're like, how did we let this guy slip through the cracks? You don't see this very often anymore where, two-way guys slip out and get to another team and kind of blossom, especially not on a championship level team. But man, Queta, you can see the benefit of his skill set, and there's still just like another level to go to. And I'm curious how they get there when the reps go down, but quite the luxury to have once you are at full health, that if you need to rest Cornet, or if Cornet's hamstring becomes a thing, like there's Queta to kind of keep you afloat.
Queta and Max Strus, those two-way guys that just
that one still hurts. The Strus one really hurts because
somewhere else.
That guy is awesome. And Javonte Green was another one that stunk for a while because of the energy you provide. Sure. But Strus is the one that really hurts because it's like, man, he would eat on this team. He would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, talking about a guy who's ready for 2024 basketball.
All right, we'll take a quick break, get right back to the show, but we got to tell you, today's show, it is powered by Game Time. Game Time is the easiest place to score tickets to whatever event you want to go to. Sure, basketball's coming, football's in full swing, baseball, depends where you live, I guess, but that's just generally behind us. You have hockey, that's going on right now. You want to swoop out to the Garden, watch the Bees, but it's not just sports. There's concerts, there's comedy, theater. Tickets can be found all over the place at Game Time. Even a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, Ev. In Game Time Picks, it filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets.
And they have this new thing, Kaufman, called the Super Deal. I don't know if you've seen this yet, if you've been perusing the Game Time app, but basically what happens is Game Time will show you pick like we always talk about the Celtics in the show. Let's say we wanted to go to opening night, and you pick you're looking through the ticket options. They'll have something called the Super Deal, which means it's in the top 1% of all tickets available for that event. If it has that super deal, you better pounce immediately because those tickets will not be there long. They're too good of a deal.
Lowest price guarantee, like Ev said. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code. It is CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that code CLNS. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS. $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Let's get back to the show.
I'll tell you what, this is a big picture show in practice. It is not a even though we've been doing a lot of obviously reaction to the Warriors game because it was such a big game. It's not a show that generally is a one game reaction kind of show. Screws' new team, even though he's been out. How about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who again are sitting at 9-0, top of the Eastern Conference? This is, and I don't want to say I expected, undefeated or anything like that, because again, that's not going to hold. And the Celtics are going to finish ahead of Cleveland, the conference standings, unless something goes really wrong. But what I will say is, and if you probably remember this, we spent a lot of time on it on the pod. The Cavaliers, what they're doing right now, and credit to Kenny Atkinson. I mean, depth is part of it, but they're playing at a faster pace and they're just, more energy. Mitchell's playing great, Garland, LeVert, all these guys. But what Cleveland is doing this year is really what I thought they were going to do in the playoffs 2 years ago when they got off to such a great start in the regular season. Then they kind of melted down. We were talking all about who do you not want to see in the playoffs? And I was saying, man, I mean, I'm not saying I think they'd lose to the Cavaliers, but I think that would be a tough series. I think that would be a tough matchup. And then it never came to fruition. We never saw it, and Cleveland went out early. Last year, they were just a mess basically from start to finish between injuries and whatever else. It never clicked right. So now the Cavs are bouncing back to, again, what I thought they were capable of being. Again, they're playing it at a higher level than I think will hold, but this is a good team. And I wonder if for all of the talk in the offseason, definitely on this show, about who are the threats in the East, and me continuously highlighting the Knicks and, kind of dumping on both the Bucks and Sixers. That, by the way, is looking okay right now, but never really acknowledging the Cavs. Was I not giving them enough credit? Forsberg, is this just a 9-0 start, or is this a team that you think wins 55, 60 games and is going to be a tough out?
55 feels, I mean, when you're 9-0, you feel pretty good about that. I do think they have positioned themselves as the next best team in the Eastern Conference, as the Knicks kind of figure out what they are and get some continuity there. And the disaster in Philly and the disaster in Milwaukee. I will say, everyone kept telling me the East was better, and I was like, are we sure? Are we sure? We do this every year. On paper, everything looks better. You got to see it. And so the Pacers got some stuff to figure out, but they're going to be kind of in that mix. And I will say I slept on the Cavs a little bit. I thought they were, just, I don't know, maybe because of the coaching stuff and the change. But what I probably underrated was the fact that getting Mitchell back and him having that security and that not being an issue, coupled with Mobley's continued development, coupled with, they just got a good mix of guys that I probably should have known it was going to look a little better. Thinking back to that Cavs series, I know there was the whole Strus and the Florida Panther jersey, and there was some fun little stuff in that series, but you never felt like the Cavs were a serious threat, and so they've still got strides to make. I think thinking back to 2 years ago when they came back crashing to earth, I think there's a little bit of you got to prove it. So I'm not ready to go kind of all in on if they drew someone like even the Pacers or the Knicks or whatever in the playoffs that I think they're going to necessarily get through that. But it's undeniable why they give the Celtics problem with their size. Mobley and Allen are quite the combo. And, and then the backcourt's great too. And I was watching the game the other night against the Bucks. Now the Bucks didn't have Giannis, but Lillard was going off. The Bucks kind of come back, go ahead in the fourth. And I'm thinking, young team, this is where they usually kind of kick it away. And it was Garland hit a big shot. And then Jared Allen had both a big play on the offensive end and a block on the other side. I'm like, man, it's not just Mitchell kind of carrying him through those stretches anymore. It's the full team. And usually that's the sign that you've sort of arrived, when everybody's giving you a little something. So yeah, if I could buy some stock that I didn't have preseason on the Cavs, it's been a really impressive start, and credit to them for sort of figuring it out.
It's a Mobley thing for me. It's the fact that Atkinson has gotten Mobley to play at a slightly different level here.
Yeah.
And so far this year, Mobley at 17 a game, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, not shooting a ton of threes, which I thought he might do by now. Shooting a better percentage, 38%, but he's only on 2 a game, which means absolutely nothing. But they've been very impressive. They have Donovan Mitchell, who, whatever you want to say about him, is a postseason killer. He's an unbelievable shot maker and a really tough guy to guard in the postseason. And if you have one of those guys, the Knicks with Jalen Brunson, obviously the Bucks with Giannis and Dame, with Tyrese Maxey in Philadelphia, if you have a guy that can get you buckets at any time, you're going to hang around a while. And this team, I am pumped for Kenny Atkinson, who got kicked out of Brooklyn for no reason at all whatsoever, other than the fact that Kyrie and Katie didn't like the guy. I'm happy that he hung around with Golden State for a while, got to just, see how a shape operation is done, and is brought it to Cleveland. Cleveland's off to a great start. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's a long season. There's probably trades to make. And there's injuries to be had. So just hope that everybody's healthy. But I mean, between them, I've never counted out Indiana at all. I know they got off to a bad start, obviously beat the Celtics in overtime the other night, but given what we saw in the Eastern Conference Finals, I will never not take that team seriously. That is an impressive offense. I don't care what the hell is going on, what their record is. Those guys can score at any moment. And I love watching them. Orlando was off to a great start, then Apollo got hurt. So, we'll see how it goes. But I like that there's new blood. It's not like the same old garden where like Miami's kind of, figuring themselves out. The Bucks are, whatever, the Phillies, whatever. There's a lot of new blood here. That's very exciting for me. Someone who likes a little bit of a change, as long as the Celtics stay on top. It's nice to have new blood coming in. But I've been very impressed with them. You can't not be impressed with them with the way they've started out. I don't think Boston should fear anybody, especially the Cavs. I think they're going to be fine. But it's nice to see some teams that weren't as highly touted to come off to a good start. Like everybody talked about the Knicks, Sixers, and Bucks to start the year. And me, Kaufman, I did not like to trade for New York. Whenever you acquire Anthony Towns, I'm going to be out on it. I'm just going to be out.
He's been very good.
What's up?
He's been very good.
Yeah, that's great. When they play the Celtics, see how he dies on 1-5 pick and rolls. It's the best. I mean, saw that coming. Saw that coming a mile away. You can't hide him and Brunson on the same team defensively. You can't do it. It's impossible. And given the quote of the offseason for me, outside of the I want to see the dot on my forehead. The other one was we have the killer whale offense and we're just hunting seals out there. The Knicks have a bunch of seals on their team, so that never moved the needle for me. But I can't wait to see them in person against Boston. There are a couple of teams I can't wait to see. Cavs, Orlando. I want to see what Orlando looks like against this team because Orlando's had a good start. But the thing is, the East, guys, the East stinks. I mean, it's really bad. I mean, at one point. And let me just take a look so we have the freshest possible look at it because I didn't look at it this morning.
Well, you can start with this, that the two perceived threats to the Celtics are sitting at the very bottom of the conference with Milwaukee and Philadelphia each at 1-6. Now, Embiid obviously has, we haven't seen him yet. He's not even going to play for another few days as things stand right now. He got himself suspended so he wouldn't have to play, and not, just like, Jesus, this guy. George, is still coming back from the injury. And then Milwaukee's just a mess, man. And I'll pat on my back, pat on my shoulder for questioning this thing the second they brought in Doc. And I'm not saying it's a Doc thing entirely, but he's part of it.
Kind of sounds like he's saying it's a Doc thing.
He's been saying it's a Doc thing no matter where Doc goes. This has been a Kaufman staple the entire time on the show.
They were like, what was their record? Like 31-10 or
31-14 when they fired
with Griffin. Yeah. And just spiraled. It was never good under Doc. Not for one moment last year was it good under Doc. And this year they are off to a 1-6 start. So again, not entirely a Doc thing, because I just think that what we're seeing is that Dame and Giannis can't really coexist. They're not a good fit. But this team being 1-6, good Lord.
Kaufman, I don't know if you know this. I have it in front of me, and it hasn't changed since I looked at it yesterday. But there are only two teams in the Eastern Conference over 500. That's Boston and Cleveland. Indiana and Brooklyn are 3rd and 4th, respectively, at 4 and 4. There are 4 teams in the Eastern Conference with a plus differential. Cleveland plus 12.6, Boston plus 11.7, the Knicks plus 2.6, and the Miami Heat at plus 0.5. Everybody else is a negative point differential. The East is a disaster. And if you were thinking anybody could challenge the Celtics this year, Wait till next year, because this is, I mean, go through the teams. Go through the teams.
But
I mean,
here's the question for Chris. Ultimately,
sure.
is the East a disaster, or is the East a disaster so far? You know, it's been
Yeah,
a couple of weeks.
I would say like it's undeniably a disaster right now, and I don't think it's as improved as people thought it was going into the year. But I do think it'll be better by the end of the year, and there will be more legitimate like, oh, we don't want to see that team in the playoffs or whatnot. And look, that might just be Paolo comes back and gets healthy, and the Magic are a play-in team, and it's like you're not ideal 1-8 matchup, or maybe it's Indiana kind of figure stuff out, and with Siakam and the benefit of time, they're better. Or the Knicks with the benefit of time are a little bit better. But yeah, every team's still got a little bit of a glaring weakness. And when I look at the Celtics, I don't see it. You know, it's themselves, it's health. You know, stuff that doesn't matter about sort of the makeup of the team. It's just more about going out there and being healthy and playing right. And so I still feel pretty confident felt really confident about the Celtics going into the year. I feel even more confident based on like how I've seen from the East, but I do think it's not going to be easy. Like no one should think this is going to be a sleepwalk. But yeah, like the idea that Milwaukee and New York and Philly and all this, like we overplayed that based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the depth for a second? Because we talked about it briefly, and we didn't talk about one guy I'd like to shout out, and I've been shouting him out a couple of games in a row here.
You want to shout out Queta?
I love the Jordan Walsh minute. I really do. And this is a guy who, look, didn't have a spectacular summer league.
Understatement.
Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I got to give the maturity of Jordan Walsh some credit, because this is a guy who comes in, doesn't shoot really at all. That's like not his job at all. Your job is to come in, defend your ass off, rebound the basketball, fill the lanes offensively. You know, if we're getting out in transition, you know, make sure you cut to the corner, crash the glass, etc. He knows where he's supposed to be. He knows what he's supposed to do, and he's bought in completely. And for a 20-year-old to do that, again, he's on a team with a bunch of guys that are way better than him. I get it. But he's bought in, and he understands that if I want more playing time, I got to do all this stuff first. And
shout out Jordan Walsh, man. Like it's everything you just said. It could have gone sideways in a hurry. Could have lost his confidence in a real hurry after that summer. And you know, Joe Mazzulla told him, you got one F to give, and then you got to move on. And he bought into it and just, okay, here's what I got to do to get on the court. And there was an opportunity with no more O'Shea, and Jordan Walsh has embraced it. And I do think it's like one of the benefits of kind of navigating the injuries will be that you've gotten a little bit of a look here at Walsh and Neemias, and you feel good about some of the deep depth pieces. And they've distinguished themselves. You know, there were times going into the preseason, I was like, all right, who's gonna emerge? Is Walsh or Springer or any of these guys gonna put their foot forward? Is Shireman gonna show he can make shots right out of the gates? And it's clear, like Walsh is so far ahead of that group based on the way he's played, and that's credit to him, because it's not easy when you're 20 to stick with it, and especially in the bumps in the road. He deserves a lot of credit.
Just
man, I'm in my 40s, and I'll tell you that I give 2 Fs about too many things. So yeah, I mean, we should all adopt the philosophy of only having 1 F to give and just moving on.
I'm just thrilled at how well he's held up on the perimeter against a multitude of guys.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, there aren't a lot of guys blowing by him on the perimeter. And, you know, again, for a younger guy like that against full grown adults here, that's good stuff. And I was surprised, I guess, a little bit when the Celtics decided to not keep Lonnie Walker, let him go to Europe. Now, again, that's still pending, this whole situation, although Denver's lurking over here with some playing time for Lonnie Walker. And it's crazy it's on our roster anyway, but they decided, hey, you know, that we might be able to revisit that. Maybe we'll see what happens with Jordan Springer. But Walsh has stepped into that spot, and again, he's not knocking down shots like Springer was. I mean, Springer's an absolute bucket. Not Springer, Walker, absolute bucket when he gets on the floor. Not providing that, but he's providing the opposite of just absolute great defense, hustle, all the stuff. So I'm very encouraged by the Jordan Walsh minutes, and when he gets on the floor, I'm not concerned at all. I'm just like watching him as like, you know, a father watches a child out there, just like, oh, let's see what he can do. It's great. It's great. I've generated all my energy into just watching Jordan Walsh minutes and just literally only watching him. And he's not really lost a bunch. He's out there hustling his ass off. And as we were on the concept of depth, I did want to bring him up because he's been a really good piece so far. And he's not overwhelmed by the moment. I really appreciate that.
If this were NBC Sports Boston, there would be a graphic being created by the graphic arts department of the
best graphic arts department in the game, without question. Those lower
sitting on a bench, just like something like that, rooting on his guy Jordan Walsh, would be out there in a little kid sweatshirt and a backpack, going off first day of school. That's what that would look like, and I would be here for it. So these next couple of games, again, Friday. See, we may be the jinx for the Wednesday games, but Friday went well last week. Bounced Charlotte there, 124-109, and we've done pretty well with these. Well, I guess that was the only Friday game. They got another one though on the way tomorrow, as we sit here right now, at home against Brooklyn, another team that is underwhelmed thus far. And then you got the Bucks on Sunday at Milwaukee. I don't want to spend a lot more time, but just to wrap up the show with this one here, these teams, they clashed once already. It was to almost close out October. It was part of the winning stretch to begin the year for the Celtics, and a rather convincing win, 119-108. Most people would say, all right, after what happened, the Bucks, they've got this one circled on the calendar. This is a bounce back. It's at their house. They still got Giannis and Dame and da-da-da-da-da. We'll see what Jalen's status is at that point in time. But are you expecting a Milwaukee win this time around? Never mind a tighter fight and battle and all that stuff. Are the Bucks going to take this one? Desperate team. I would expect that they will give you their best punch, and you got to be ready for it. You think back, like it was an extenuating circumstance going up there last season, when I think the Celtics were coming off that Minnesota game, that overtime win, and they had nothing left, and they went up there and they pushed the Bucks pretty hard with the JV squad. It's probably unfair to call them that, but a lot of backups, and ended up falling. And so, I expect that they'll get a punch, but you got a chance to really make that team think about where it's at. And I hope the Celtics are braced for that.
I'm fully ready for the Bobby Portis 20-point game. Fully ready.
After he hasn't been great this year either, and he'll probably dust himself off for this one.
That's the point. He's been absolutely garbage this year, and it's going to happen this game. But the one thing I'll say about the Bucks, and I've said this a bunch to other people, Brook Lopez having a spectacular season, but their perimeter defense is making him do way too much work. I mean, going into the game that they played against Boston, nobody had contested more shots to the rim than Brook Lopez, which good for Brook Lopez that he's been awesome, but that's not great for Milwaukee to have the last guy defense being just getting work every single possession. And when I watched Peyton Pritchard just shred everybody up that last game, I'm good. I'm confident. I'm preparing myself emotionally for the Bobby Portis 20-point game. Maybe they can survive that. We'll see how it goes.
20 plus out of Peyton Pritchard. Just wait. It's coming. Celtics coming off a rare loss against the Warriors. It's okay. It happens. The sky is not falling. The world is not, well, maybe it is, but for different reasons. Not having anything to do with the Boston Celtics. They are champs, and they will be champs until someone else is a champ. And hopefully that's not for a couple of years at this point in time. Celtics sitting at 7-2. Just got to jump back into first in the Eastern Conference. Not a priority for Missoula, but I want it. All right. Thanks to Chris Forsberg hopping on here with us bright and early on a Thursday in this little sandwich situation in the schedule. It's back to work Friday against the Nets for the C's. And next week, we'll get off of the third. We'll get back to Friday after what we have done to these poor Wednesday games. For Evan Valenti, for Chris Forsberg, I am Adam Kaufman. Thank you for being here with us. And we'll talk again next week.